And the heist begins.
A new chapter awaits.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Mattoon Corner. I'm Mattoon, and this mechanical marvel is Adam.
Good day, everybody.
It feels good to be back here so soon. Not as fast as I'd like, of course, but we're getting there.
Better roughly a month than 6.
True that, my friend. Now then, let's get down to brass tacks. Who here knows about Sly Cooper? One of the most iconic characters of the PS2 era, Sly's debut game was a fun and charming romp that, while not perfect, definitely laid a foundation for the kind of game it was. Stealth action platformer. This is a genre that is sorely lacking nowadays. A lot of platformers brush upon the occasional stealth section for a single level, but it's never a major focus in the game itself. Even Sly Cooper and the Thieves Raccoonist didn't go as far into the stealth aspect as it could have, despite having a lot of potential. The idea of having to platform these obstacle courses while keeping out of sight is a novel one, but you can only do so much of a handful of mechanics.
You make it seem like you didn't adore the game in the last video.
Oh heavens no, I adore this game. But I can't deny that as a stealth game, it was lacking. It had great moments, but it was dragged down slightly with the fluff they added, such as some mediocre minigames and boss fights, though its short length makes it infinitely replayable. This is a good game here, and people seem to agree, having it even go on to be released as a PS2 Greatest Hits. But you clicked on this video for a reason. We're not here to talk about Sly 1. With success on their hands, Sucker Punch had to be brought back to produce a sequel. Spoiler alert, but it's my personal favorite game in the entire franchise. And honestly, one of my favorite games of all time.
Your biases are showing.
I'm not gonna deny that, but I've made a point to try to be as fair in my review as possible. This is a game I've poured countless hours into. And honestly, while I still adore it, I know it's got some issues. With that said, let's pop this bad boy in and check it out. Once again, I need to remind you all that I'll be playing the game through the Sly Trilogy emulated on a PS3 emulator, RPCS3, purely because I don't have a capture card, and my original PS2 version is not with me at the moment. With that said, let's take a look at Sly 2 Band of Thieves. Oh, it's good to be home. Like the first game, we open up on a quick shot of the characters in motion. But unlike the first game, we see that Sly is not alone on the field this time. I will say this is also a jab at the Sly Trilogy, but the lighting in the scene was kinda neutered. The original has these dark shadows making them look like actual silhouettes. Here, you can just see them. It's boring, plain and simple. That aside though, this game's presentation takes the previous game and improves upon it so much. The color palette is more colorful, the characters are more expressive. Sly's model has obviously gotten a bit of a change, but the most notable thing here are the animations. See, in Sly 1, there was always more of a constant movement in the character's talking animations. Sly would always be lightly moving his head and ears. No one ever really stood still. Given how there weren't many in-person 3D cutscenes, this was fine as it helped make them a bit more visible, but Sly 2 takes a much different approach. Here, the characters have a much larger emphasis on key poses. Characters will often freeze and hold on specific poses while speaking, the tilt of their heads, mouth movement, and expressions changing depending on the situation. While there's technically less animation, the characters have become significantly more expressive, and it's awesome. Sly frowns, he gets surprised, the characters' snappy poses each show off their personalities in an amazing way. The 2D animated scenes are also back, and my god, I adore this art direction. Unlike the first game, there's more of an emphasis on thick black lines, key poses, and bright colors. This is the art style most people associate with this franchise, and it's not hard to see why. This is what comes to mind when I think Sly. While there's not really much change in terms of actual design, the characters look absolutely stunning. Cutscenes are also much more used in the levels proper. Before, there was only really a story in between levels, but here you find much more scenes and talks between the characters as you progress, making them all feel much more lively, and honestly more involved in the plot. Speaking of plot, Sly 2's story picks up 2 years after the first game ended. Clockwork, the final boss of the last game, was fished out of the volcano he was in, and his parts were set up in a museum in Cairo. You can actually find a lot of the art from the original game as paintings, and even including a lot of original concept art for Sly. Super neat. Anyways, Sly and his pals want to get the parts for themselves to keep them out of the wrong hands, only to find out that they were already taken by a group known as the Claw Gang from Neela, Inspector Carmelita Fox's new partner in Interpol. Now Sly has to find the 5 members, gather all the clockwork parts, and finally put an end to the legacy of clockwork. Sly 2's plot jumps straight into the action and only really gives you a rundown afterwards, but it's clear that the stakes are much higher. This game really solidifies Clockwork's role as this almost demonic force in the Cooper gang's life. Clockwork himself doesn't really make much of an appearance in the game, but his legacy is expanded on so much, creating almost this mythos around him. There's a reason he's the most recognizable Sly villain, and honestly the most memorable. So the plot tends to follow a similar episodic formula like the first game. Unlike the first game, however, there's more twists and turns to the narrative. Things happen between the 2D cutscenes as opposed to Sly just being a nuisance to the level's big bad.
A good analogy would be to compare the first game's plot to a Saturday morning cartoon, whereas the sequels are more of a serialized episodic story.
Exactly! Sly's levels are always meant to be a bit more self-contained while building up the plot, but here, events from the previous levels truly do impact the future ones in ways you'd be very surprised with. And stuff like that's pretty uncommon. Like, what starts off as a simple throwaway line involving Spice ends up being a crucial part of the game's climax and story. It ends up touching some surprisingly dark stuff too. Now, I don't mean that in the same way that, let's say, Jak and Daxter or Ratchet & Clank did, with a more cynical side to them. Sly's plot honestly never passes a PG rating, but it never talks down to you. It never feels like they think you couldn't handle what's said, and it's not afraid to tug at your heartstrings either. It's not a kid's plot, but it doesn't exclude them as an audience. Does that make sense? I have the mentality for a lot of shows, and in my opinion, it's the best way to go about making your story for a younger audience. Don't dumb down your stories, make them accessible to everyone. Okay, that ended up being a bit of a ramble. A game can have an amazing plot, but if the gameplay isn't satisfying, you won't have much of a game either. Thankfully, Sly 2 delivers, refining on what was made in the first game to near perfection. Sly has a few new tricks. The first thing you'll notice is Sly's base movement has been reduced. Instead, you can now hold the R1 button to bring into a sprint, going to the original speed of the first game. Now why would they do that, you ask? Well, simply put, running is loud, so it becomes a risk that can attract enemy attention, whereas walking will allow you to sneak by undetected. And this is where the game's design really shows how it shifted. No longer are we in linear point A to B levels. Now, every level is a larger open area with several story-based missions and collectibles. Clicking the left stick will show you the objectives, and the right stick opens your binocucom. Each mission is tied to the story. You'll find yourself with an objective either in the open hub area or a smaller, more confined area to navigate. Whether it's stalking an enemy from afar, pickpocketing enemies for keys, tossing items to destroy devices, or planting bombs in just the right place. These levels are more akin to small sandboxes. You can go straight over to the next objective, or you can go around and explore. Although admittedly, there's only a handful of things you can do here. The funnest one, and one you'll find yourself doing a lot, is pickpocketing. Sly is a thief after all. By sneaking up to an enemy, you can nab a few coins from them. Coins in the first game serve for getting 1-ups and lucky charms, whereas here they serve as a currency for new power-ups. Enemies with glowing pockets usually have a special item you can sell at the hideout for even more coins, which is probably how you'll save up for the more expensive powers later on. No longer are they exclusive to safes. You buy them and they each give you a different useful ability, though the clue bottles do also make a return, and now appear only in the main hub areas, drastically reducing the amount but making them much more meaningful to collect. Getting all of them unlocks exclusive abilities for Sly, like a one-hit melee KO, the knockout dive from the first game, and even the invisibility power. These do use up resources however, so be careful. Though like before, I do find some much more useful than others. Like the slide ability is an improved version of the roll from the first game. It allows you to move faster than running downhill without attracting guards. And you can't forget the paraglider for more mobility, and the alarm clock to distract the guards. Though on the flip side, I don't find stuff like Bentley's Shrink Gadget all that useful. And yeah, you heard that right, Sly's not the only one you can play as here. Bentley and Murray are playable here too. They have much more limited movesets than Sly however. Sly has his usual set of moves like climbing ropes, ladders, walking on ropes, etc. The other two on the other hand are stuck running on foot. They can get on rooftops in more than a few levels, but you'll find yourself running on the road with them often. Murray is a tank and he can take out enemies quickly. 2 hits and pop, they're down. Bentley on the other hand isn't nearly as strong, but he is equipped with sleet darts and bombs that can make quick work of everyone. It's nice to see Murray and Bentley start to become their own characters here. In the first game, they were essentially just Sly's hype men, but this is the beginning of Bentley and Murray's character arcs as their own people, as Master Fee's on the same level as Sly and not just his gang. These three each provide different experiences to play as, but when you're out and about, you'll usually find yourself playing as Sly, as he can maneuver all around the stage and can pickpocket enemies to grind for coins. Of course, since the game is stealth focused, you don't want to get caught. If you do, you'll be stuck with two options: run or fight. You'll find yourself doing the former more often than not, but the combat in the game is decent, I'd say. Sly and the gang now have health bars, which depending on the enemy just means you can take 3 to 4 hits before going down. Combat essentially boils down to landing a hit, back up as the enemy has a hitbox when they get back up, and whack them again. If you're on the floor, you run the risk of running into flashlight guards, who are still going to decimate you. But with characters like Murray, he can two-shot any enemy, and they do tend to drop health, so Murray can legit just beat up enemies for a long time and be completely fine. This also applies to the game's bosses for the most part, as they involve simply learning the patterns and hammering away at them. Overall, they are more consistently good compared to the first game, but nothing spectacular either. Jean Bisson probably has the most interesting one, as you need to use your environment to hurt him. It's really cool stuff, I'm not gonna lie. You'll be doing this a lot, and honestly, this is the game's most repetitive bit, though combat is usually lesser in favor of stealth, thankfully. And my god, they actually improved on it a lot. Sly has a sneak kill now, which he can use to avoid combat against larger enemies, at the cost of attracting enemies to him, meaning it's a mad dash to go high to remain undetected. Though later on, you do unlock the ability to do a silent takedown. I love this, there's more of a reward for keeping yourself hidden. It's not just rush in and attack before they can hit you. You really need to think and optimize how you move. This is where the bulk of the gameplay is. Sneak up, pickpocket, stealth takedown, repeat. While it can get a bit repetitive, it is an extremely satisfying gameplay loop. And thankfully there are a few outliers to break up the repetition. Chasing after Neela, quick platforming and stealth sections. Heck, even more minigame-esque challenges like bouncing on balloons to fill up a spice bomb. Huh. Well, ain't that dandy. The barrel is back too, yes! This is one of my favorite parts of the entire franchise. So basically there are a few missions where Sly has access to a TNT barrel. Standing still will allow him to remain completely invisible to flashlights and spotlights. But unlike the last game, you need to stay in the barrel, because jumping out will cause it to detonate. So you can't easily deal with the enemies to move safely. It's easily one of the funnest and best objectives they've made for the game. Bentley and Murray's objectives also follow suit. Bentley's are usually tasked with gathering or destroying things with his explosives, and Murray's are usually about combat, destroying things with his bare hands. This is where you'll find the bulk of the minigame levels. Yep, they're back, though not nearly as frustrating as before. Bentley hacking has been given a facelift and it's still one of the funnest in the game, along with his RC copter, allowing for fun aerial battles. And both of them also get turret sections. Why is this here? Again, turret sections don't belong in a platformer. There's already enough variety with the hacking and the variety of different objectives in the gameplay styles. Why? These ones are worse to control than the ones in the first game! These are really the only ones I'm not too keen on. They aren't bad, but they just feel so sluggish when the rest of the game just works a lot better. Even the combat, as simple and fine as it is, at least makes more sense than hopping into a turret.
So again, the levels are hit and miss.
True, but this time it hits much more than it misses. Not every mission here is perfect, but it's much more consistently good than the first game. And that's saying something. Some levels here are close to perfect. Except the third level. This is probably the worst designed level in the game. This one is just a chaotic mess of vines and not even any decent place to stay above ground. It's hard to navigate and honestly it's just not fun. Though it is the proper introduction of the barrel, so I guess it's fine. Well, after 7 levels of all that, we've reached the end game. Kinda. Okay, so I'll be spoiling the game's twist, which is a big shame because we get some really cool story beats really early on, and it won't nearly be as effective if you just hear it from me. So please, skip here if you don't want to be spoiled for this incredible game. If you're still here, however, let's get started. Okay, so things start off pretty formulaic. The first 3 levels establish a sort of formula for Sly's levels, a 4-act structure in a way. The introduction, learning the layout, the setup, and the heist. Each one separated via the slideshows Bentley will give you, But at the end of level 3, everything gets turned on its head when Sly and Murray get arrested, after Neela, who we thought was our informant and ally, double-crosses us, thus leading to one of my favorite levels in the entire franchise, Jailbreak. This is a level that doesn't really follow the structure of the previous ones, or even any one that comes afterwards. It stands out from the franchise as a whole. At the start, you're only using Bentley as he tries to break Sly and Murray out of jail. A simple premise, but the level start feels oppressive. The music is dark. The first visual you see is Bentley on the PC. You're playing as a character who, again, isn't as easy to navigate the world. Even the cutscenes in this level are narrated by Bentley instead, and the way he's, well, kinda not all there as he talks is kinda telling. He's scared, he's worried. This game throws one of the most interesting plot twists I've seen in a game. It builds up your trust only to throw it back in your face at the end. After this level, things fall back into the usual, but even at the end of the 7th level, another roadblock. All the clockwork parts we've collected, lost, and Sly and the gang end up having to figure out just what the Clock Gang, or more specifically Arpeggio, was planning. Every level, we've been slowly painting a picture of what the greater picture was, from a nightclub serving spices, the origin of the spice, and how it could be used to induce hypnosis using flashing lights. It all comes to a head to recreate Clockwork's immortality in a new body. After a quick on-the-fly jaunt through Arpeggio's construction site, Neela betrays Arpeggio, because of course she does, and ends up being reborn as Clockla. Kinda an anticlimactic name, to be honest, but it's a great culmination of everything the game's been leading up to, leading to some of the more challenging missions in the game. Some of these involve starting the mission with one character and ending with another, which was seen in previous levels, but these ones are much more better paced, giving you clear goals to set things up before the big battle against a reincarnated immortal bird. Like the last game, Carmelita appears at the end to give us a hand. She was a tad more involved in the plot this time, being a driving force in several levels, and even teaming up with Sly from time to time. Here it culminates in an epic battle against Clockla, where we shoot her with a turret. Ah! This is worse than the first game's final boss. Again, the turret in this game is just not fun. The shots you have to deal with are even more irritating because you can't dodge anything. It's shoot the blasting missiles and hope you manage to get everything. All of the turret levels are like this. Man, we don't even have a decent platforming bit at the end. We have a section where we paraglide over to Clockla, but again ends with us just smacking her head. Man, Sly does not have really good final bosses, huh? Well, the game ends with a quick laser avoidance bit, which isn't nearly as long or as arduous as the one from the first game either. At the end, we remove Clockla's core, the hate chip. All's well that ends well, right?
Ah! My glasses!
What? Bentley! I'll save you!
Pick me up! I can't walk!
Come on, Sly, let's get out of here!
What just happened?
Yeah, so in a shocking turn of events, Bentley gets paralyzed from the waist down due to getting chomped by Clockla's beak. And I don't just mean like in shock either, I mean he loses the use of his legs. This genuinely scared me when I was younger. It was so sudden you don't even realize it until it happens. We end off destroying Clockwork's hate chip, and the end is just somber. There's no triumphant fanfare like the first game, it's just finally over. And when Sly and Carmelita make a deal to let Bentley and Murray go, it's just sad. It's just, if the series ended here, that'd be it. I genuinely thought they hung up their masks for their thieving career. We won, but it felt like we lost so much more. The ending does provide a bit of closure though, letting Sly and Carmelita spend some time together before Sly manages to slip away again, paragliding away and ready to keep on doing what he does best.
I'll find you, Cooper! I'll be seeing you soon, Ringtail.
This game's ending, while not entirely fulfilling, sets up the finale of the character arcs, which will be explored more in the third game. That said, this ending does still mean a lot to me. It's not as grand and it's not much of a happy ending, but there's something about stopping things here, at least for now, that tells me that Sucker Punch was confident they could end what they made here. And honestly, if they did end with Sly and the gang going their separate ways, well, I think that's a pretty strong ending as well. Man, I love this game.
I can tell. So, what can you do after you beat the game?
Well, first and foremost, you can always revisit levels at any time to collect more clue bottles and anything else you might miss, like treasures. Optional things that let you nab some more cash if you can bring them to the safe house in one piece. Aside from that, completing certain levels will unlock bonus videos for your viewing pleasure, like this super cool animation of the, quote, second season of Sly Cooper, and some commercials for the game too! They removed the commercials from the trilogy for disk space again, didn't they?
Yes, sir.
God damn it, I hate this company! Yeah, well, at least we got cheat codes. Now this is one thing I've always liked, hopping on to CheatCC, anyone remember CheatCC? And finding all the cheat codes, which is mostly just telling you to get all the clue bottles, but there's also the Mega Jump cheat, and being able to get freaking Tom as an alarm item. Screw alarm clocks, I want to use Tom. You know, Tom from Tsunami, he's in this game, it's amazing. Now I've mentioned a few minor gripes, but this is probably my biggest one. Once you have everything, there's nothing left for you to do. And worst of all, there's no way to replay missions. Want to stalk Dimitri again? Nope. Want to pickpocket the Contessa because you like getting close to scary women? Nuh-uh. Want to replay the Lumberjack games like I did as a kid because I was freaking insane and I liked the music? Not happening. It's frustrating because it's the only game in the franchise that doesn't let you replay missions, making it the most difficult one to just boot in and play around in. Even Thieves in Time got this right. Because of this, do you know what I do as a kid to replay missions? Make a new game, input the level select cheat code, which thankfully still works in the PS3 version of the level I want to play, and replay the entire level up until the mission I wanted to play. I have replayed level 7 more times than I care to admit. When you're a kid, you really do have all the time in the world, huh? Yeah, unless you really adore this game, it won't be the kind of game you replay over and over again. But I still implore you to check it out. It's an incredibly enjoyable experience which, while it can be a bit repetitive, ends up telling one of the best plots in a platformer. It doesn't speak down to its audience. You feel attached to these characters as they celebrate their success and wallow in defeat. It's one of the best platformers of the PS2 era, and it deserves more attention than it gets. Well, I guess that's all I got to say about Sly 2, which means we're heading into the third game of the trilogy.
Something wrong? You don't look as excited this time around.
Well, I actually first played this game just last year. This is the one game of the original series I don't have much nostalgia for. Not because I didn't want it, I just never had the opportunity to get it and play it for myself. So this one is actually fairly recent in my memory. I'm excited to see if it holds up. I remember not liking it as much as 2, but that was before I was looking at these critically. And I know opinion on these two tend to go either or. Some people prefer 2, while others prefer 3. We'll see what I have to say when we tackle Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves next time. As always, thanks for watching, folks. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to always be cool and be creative.